the sink, it sounds ridiculous, but the sink in the transverse wet bar is kind of faceted and sculpted in a sort of lustrous black. So it's like an art installation.
Are you getting excited about a sink?
I am a little bit, yeah. It's these small things, isn't it? Welcome to Boat Geeks, a new series of podcasts brought to you by Boat Geek number 1, that's Hugo Andreae, editor of Motor Boat and Yachting magazine, and Boat Geek number 2, that's me, Alex Smith, deputy editor. Now, the plan with this is very simple. Once a week, we'll aim to go down to a boat, step on board, and talk about new boats, talk about new boating products, and talk about the issues of the day, any questions that we think might be likely to get the juices flowing.
Right, well, here we are. Today we're down at Premier Marina's Swanwick facility on board a very lovely Princess F65. So thank you very much to Princess Motor Yacht Sales for loaning a rather more interesting studio than a dull place in Reading, which was the alternative.
Well, this is nice, isn't it, Hugo? Beats the office.
It certainly does. I mean, if you're going to do a podcast, why not do it on board a lovely boat?
Exactly. I like the simplicity of it. A couple of boat fans on board a boat chatting about boats.
That's the idea, so long as we can entertain people.
Isn't it just? But we have actually been really quite ambitious with the subject matter for this very first ever podcast because, as most of you probably know, the Dusseldorf Boat Show has just happened. A huge event, the biggest indoor show in the world. And a lot of world and European launches, not quite as many as Cannes.
I don't think quite as many because people seem to save all their new boats up for the Cannes show and there's a massive splurge. And then you get to Dusseldorf sort of 3 or 4 months later and it feels like everyone's slightly shot their load. But...
Yeah. Delicately put.
Yeah, well.
You might argue actually that some of the manufacturers who intended to have a boat in Cannes just got a little bit tardy and decided, OK, Dusseldorf, that's the place for the launch of this particular platform.
There's a bit of that. And I think the Dusseldorf show is also really strong on certain types of boats. So some of the Nordic builders, you get a lot of boats appearing there that just don't make their way down to Cannes. So particularly if you're a British buyer or Northern European, there's a really good choice of boats that are right up your street. So
as for boats, we're certainly going to talk about our respective favourites from the Dusseldorf show. And as for the kit, well, it's going to be all about inflatable tenders today.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, almost everyone has a tender of some kind on board their boat. And there's certainly a few things that are worth knowing that we've learned probably the hard way.
Very much the hard way. I think it kind of splits opinion whether you actually want a tender, an inflatable tender or not. I've certainly owned a few and I haven't enjoyed all of them.
No, well, I think in an ideal world, you've got a big enough boat to have a garage and you can stick it in there, not worry about it. But for the rest of us, with more modestly sized boats, it's a really important thing to try and get the right one.
Exactly so. And the third section today, the issue is going to be pontoon boats for the UK, yes or no? Now, that is probably a lot less divisive.
I don't know about that. I reckon I could answer that question in about one word.
Exactly. Well, it's divisive for you and me because I say yes, you say no. We'll get to that in a bit. But first... the best boats from Dusseldorf.
Best new ones, presumably, because there were about 1 million boats there, and I don't think we're going to cover them all.
That's a useful qualification. So we've got about 9 or 10 to talk about, haven't we?
Yeah, fair enough. Who's going to kick off then?
Well, you kick me off with the Princess F58, given that we're sitting on the 65.
Yep.
Makes a good bit of sense. Now, prior to the show, I was looking at that boat thinking, is it really substantially different to what we've seen before?
Well, that's always the thing with Princess. They're fairly conservative. They don't go overboard with new gizmos and gadgets. They have a chosen recipe. They know how to do it, and they do it really, really well. And the F58 pretty much sticks to that formula. There's nothing wild or wacky about it, but it is a really solid advance on the previous boat. It's so refined. It's so well thought out. But there are some fun little features on it. So they've done their first sort of beach club attempt, but rather than going all out with folding platforms and all that kind of shenanigans, they've kept it quite simple. So they've got a nice little bench that folds out from the transom. Yeah. They've got the option of having a wet bar with a grill and a galley and a sink and that kind of thing. But my favourite feature is the little sea-bob locker. I don't know if you saw that. You know what I mean by a sea-bob?
I do, but I didn't actually visit the F58 at all during that show. So
okay, so if you've ever used a sea-bob, they're these kind of underwater scooter things, and they weigh a load. They're about 35 kilos, and they're really awkward to handle and get on and off the bathing platform. So what they've done, they've built a lovely little bespoke locker, but inside that locker is a little track that slides out ever so smoothly. And it just makes the whole process that much easier. And it just looks cool. You open a locker, you pull a slide, and it serves this little sea-bob to you relatively easy, lift up, bung it in the sea, job done. So it's one of those little surprise and delight features. It's just adds way more than it's probably actually worth, but it looks cool, works very nicely.
Sounds good, but quite a minor sort of feature upgrade on a boat that we kind of understand in terms of the formula that goes into putting it together.
Yeah.
So what else was there at the show that particularly excited you?
About the princess, or
No, not about the princess. I've moved on from
moving
the princess
on
now. Yeah,
cool. You're not getting me long, are you?
No.
All right. Well, Sunseeker also had a new boat there. It wasn't an entirely new boat. It's the 2025 edition of the Manhattan 68. But I wasn't expecting a lot. I thought, sometimes they just put a slightly different window molding or a slightly different interior finish. But they've gone really clever on this. They've created a lot of sort of versatility by having various different options in terms of you can have separate access to the owner's cabin, or you can just have the sole access and then you get a bigger saloon. But what I really like is the way that they've treated the aft galley. Now, aft galleys have been a big thing for a while in Flybridge world. Really nice because you've got that interaction between the kitchen, the galley, and the cockpit. But what they've done, rather than having the galley on one side and a dining area on the other, they spread the galley across the full beam of the boat and then put the dining table inside the galley. So it's kind of a bit like a sort of breakfast dinette area. And then doors open up, window opens up, and then there's a really good integration with the cockpit. So the whole area kind of becomes an entertaining zone. You can eat, you can cook, you can chat, you can use it as a bar. Just a really nice solution that integrates the whole area rather than having lots of different separate areas.
Proper social hub of that main deck.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's how we all live at home really these days, isn't it? It's all open plan. You're all, the cook wants to be part of the action. You all live in there. It's just kind of how you live at home. So why not do that at sea?
It's exactly right. We've had a kitchen island. It was a special thing, let me tell you. And there's a couple of boats I want to mention in relation to that. Is the gourmet cruiser from Merrick's, the 440, that made the galley very explicitly the social hub of the boat. Thought that was brilliant. And also a boat we saw at Cannes, that Pardo 70, was it GT75, I want to say.
Oh, that's a good looking boat.
Yeah, and when you have the two cabins on the low deck instead of the foyer, huge central section, and they'd used that entirely for a lounge and a kitchen with a big kitchen island in the centre, and it was spectacular. It's exactly the way I would want to go boating, as you say.
Yeah, but I think definitely a trend is now giving customers options rather than having a fixed solution, take it or leave it, giving people the option whether they want this style of galley, whether they want a big saloon and slightly smaller cabins, or a smaller saloon and bigger cabins, or more privacy. I think if you're spending, these boats are not cheap. We're talking, £2-3 million plus. You want to get exactly the layout that suits you, not just what they happen to make that they think will work.
Well, actually, talking of options, there's one particular option from one particular boat at that show. I saw a little video from you on it, and I absolutely loved the look of it. And that was the Steeler Beach Club 62. Tell us about that.
That is really something quite special. That is a full custom-built boat. And of course, calling it the Beach Club, they've really gone for it. So rather than just having a sort of small area at the back, they've given a good, probably sort of 30-40% of the length of this 62-foot boat to the Beach Club. They've got a massive sunbed in the middle of it, and then they have two separate bars facing out aft over the Beach Club. But the really unusual thing is that rather than having the cockpit and the Beach Club on a different level to the main seating area up above and the saloon, they've got two sort of half levels, so you can go down into the accommodation or up into the accommodation. And so what they've done is, using that area down there, they've called it a beach restaurant. So effectively they've got a galley and a sort of dining area on the lower deck. So you come off the Beach Club straight into that lower deck restaurant, or you can go up, and then upstairs there's a second galley, all a bit more formal. So you've got the option either to, if you want to, maybe if you dine at night, you want a little bit more formal, a bit smarter, you can go upstairs. If you want that more informal thing during the daytime, you go downstairs and you duplicate the both. It's a bit strange. Some people say, well, why do you really need two galleys on board? No, you don't need it, but it's not about need, is it? It's about having a boat that works for your lifestyle. Yeah,
exactly. Well put. I love that kind of that creative reinterpretation of deck levels and that sort of flow. You see a lot of that with in the past with Blue Game and San Lorenzo, haven't you? Yeah. And I've loved that, actually.
The two other things, though, that's very cool about that boat before we move on. First thing, the whole roof lifts up. So rather than having a flybridge or a sunroof, the whole top deck of that is on 4 large hydraulic struts that lift up, and the whole roof lifts up, and then effectively you've got like an open boat. So
wow,
that's a cool feature. Second cool feature, right up in the bow.
Yes, Hugo. This is what I was excited about in the first place. Go on.
So a lot of boats now have a little bow lounge up front
Yeah.
with a kind of couple of seats and maybe a sunbed. This one has something that I've never seen before, and that is a tiny little remote helm station. So you can now drive a boat entirely from a joystick rather than having to have a wheel and throttles. So they've just got this lovely little cozy seating area, and right in the middle of it, a little joystick, so you can drive the boat from right up in the bow. Slightly controversial, some people say, well, shouldn't you have access to chart plotters and VHFs? Well, that's up to you. I think if you're just moving from bay to bay, or if you're in an area that you know well, there's plenty of depth, don't have to worry too much about things like that. You've got such a great view and such a cool place
like
just to sit and drive
not
your
necessary, but a lot of fun. I've driven a few smaller boats where you helm basically from the forepeak, and that feels fantastic because you can kind of interpret and see the wave shapes. You kind of mixing it with the elements a little bit, and the whole of the boat is behind you. But on a boat of that scale, not quite knowing what's going on behind you, you certainly wouldn't want to manoeuvre in a marina.
No,
with
God,
a
no,
control.
no,
like
you wouldn't
that,
use
would
it. Or if you're going any distance, you're just going to be too exposed and you need access to all that stuff. But if you're just moving around in a bay, or if you're in a local area, because let's face it, a lot of these boats get used as day boats. You just go out for a day with a bunch of mates. It's somewhere you know very well. And then it's pretty magical driving the whole thing from there. I mean, you feel like you're in charge of the Starship Enterprise or
it's
something.
pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was a bit jealous of that one. And I was also jealous, actually, of another couple of boats, Prestige F4.3, wasn't it? And also the new Turkish brand, IATA.
Yeah. 2 interesting boats, sort of slightly different approach. But I think where Prestige have been really clever is that rather than that being an all-new boat, they've actually used the hull from the previous Prestige 420, but they've done a completely different layout on the main deck. So just by changing the superstructure, it feels like a totally different boat.
You still get that ocean view galley, do you, at the back end?
Yeah, so this is the big thing. Again, it seems to be all about the galleys at the moment.
Yeah.
And what they've done with this one is rather than having a galley tucked in the corner that faces out over the side of the boat, they've totally reoriented it so that it faces across the beam, the full beam of the boat, facing out into the cockpit, and then put doors on either side. So rather than coming in through the aft end of the boat, you can flow in through either side into the saloon, but then you have a big window opening up into the cockpit. So again, you've just got that lovely interaction. If you're working in the galley, cooking something up for lunch, or just serving a drink, you've got that very natural relationship with the rest of the cockpit and the guests and friends, family sitting there.
Yeah, we've seen that on the larger boats from that same line, haven't we?
Yeah.
This next generation line of flybridges from Prestige. But in terms of the lower deck, they've actually mixed that up a bit because the owner's cabins on the larger models are tucked up in the bow, and I think you've got a full beam cabin here, have you?
Well, for a 43-foot boat, very unusual to have a full beam cabin, and I think that's a real winner at that size because it just feels so much more luxurious when you're staying on board to have a full beam owner's cabin, windows on both sides. Obviously, you haven't got full standing headroom on a boat that size, but it's still a big win to have a full beam owner's cabin on a craft of that size.
Yeah, it's good stuff, isn't it? They do well with their flybridges, have done for decades, in fact.
Yeah, good value too.
Yeah. What sort of money are we looking at for that?
Well, I say good value. I mean, it's still, by any normal standards, I'm going to have to double check, but I think it's around about, £600,000. Now, obviously, load of money, however you look at it, but relative to the competition, to have a boat of that size and standard, and it's a good quality of finish on board now. I think that's impressive value for money for.
Yeah, they're doing a good job. And somebody else who's doing a great job, given the fact that they've only just come into existence, is IATA, as I say, new Turkish brand.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting new brand. A lot of new brands at the show. Some you think, well, are they in it for the long run? IATA very much feels like it. They're backed by a big Turkish conglomerate. They've got serious money behind them, and they've gone the right route. They've employed a really professional boat designer, a chap called Jarko Jamson. You've probably come across him.
Axopar man, isn't it?
Yeah, he's designed a lot of Axopars, some of the Swan powerboats. So he really knows what he's doing, and he's come up with some clever ideas on that.
The chief of which is the kind of modularity.
Yeah, so a lot of companies will do a certain amount of modularity. And when we say that, what we're talking about is giving customers you start with a sort of simple base model and then you can change various elements of it. But rather than having to choose in advance whether you want a cabin boat or a open suntop boat, or whether you want a fishing module or a seating module, the great thing about this is you can buy the base model and then upgrade it or even change it afterwards. So you can start off with an open boat, just with a hardtop, suntop, as they call it. But you can then add the sides and the aft end and create a cabin boat after you've bought it.
That makes so much sense, that, doesn't it?
It does, because let's face it, a lot of the time you may not have the money to go right. the whole hog, or you may just change your mind later. You buy it first of all and you think, well, I love an open boat, it's great, mostly use it in the summer. And then you think, hang on, this is a really good hull. I could use this all year round if only it was a bit more sheltered.
Yeah, I know you weren't particularly a fan of the aesthetic of the things. I mean, I think with that fine entry and that radically flared bow, that actually, it keeps you drier in a seaway, but also it generates all that extra space in the bow, usable day space that they can configure, as you say, modularly. I think it's a really effective way to design a boat, and I think it looks pretty cool. It looks pretty purposeful to me.
Yeah, I sort of agree. It certainly works in terms of the extra space, and having a big bow flare obviously means that it throws all the water out sideways and you don't get such a wet ride. But I still just don't particularly like that really blunt nose look. It just
fair dues. But the finish. Okay, the finish was impressive, wasn't it? I only had a brief poke about kick some tyres, but with so many boat number ones, you go and you have a look and you think, well, it wasn't quite ready for the show, and it's certainly not quite ready to put out to a world audience, to punters. This feels like a prototype. They did not feel like prototypes to me.
No, not at all. And the nice thing, they've got some very skilled craftsmen over in Turkey, and there's just some really nice little touches of use of wood where you'd normally just find a GRP moulding or something, and it just adds, but feels a bit more special. Looks a bit different, nicely finished, and it feels solid too. A lot of these small boats can feel a little bit flimsy. That, not at all. That felt rock solid. So obviously wait for the sea trial to really see how it works, but first impressions, good.
Really strong, and about 320,000 euros.
Yeah, 38-foot boat. So it's quite a lot of boat for the money. Plenty of power. You can have twin outboards. I think it's up to 450 horsepower. I think they've got 53 knots out of it. No, I think it's a
serious
promising
performance
looking
boat as well. Well, you saw some pretty special boats at Dusseldorf. I feel that's probably because you went first a couple of days before I turned up. But
yeah, well, obviously, I just picked the best ones.
You do. You cherry-picked the good stuff. But I picked out some pretty good stuff myself. Now, I mentioned the Merrick's 440 Gourmet Cruiser, which I think is a spectacular boat. In fact, we all do, because it won an MBY award. Deservedly so.
Very nice boat, yeah.
I visited the factory itself. I've seen how they're put together. And back then, Espen, the boss there, was promising a more conventional saloon layout where you get more seating in place of that massive galley, which essentially fills the saloon on that early boat. Does seem a bit
overkill. So what's the new one like then?
Well, as I say, conventional. And that might feel to some people a little bit disappointing. But when you get on board a boat like a Merrick's, particularly when you've walked around the show and seen other boats, the quality, it's just so tangible, isn't it?
They do a really nice job.
Such a good job. And you fear when you go from the big Gourmet Cruiser sort of galley layout to the more conventional seating in the saloon, that you're going to lose some of the key elements that enabled you to go cruising long term on that Gourmet Cruiser, like the huge refrigeration. That means you don't have to keep going in and replenishing your supplies, and the big water tanks.
Can't have too much fridge space.
You just can't. And it's still got massive amount of refrigeration. It's still got a 700 litre water tank. So there's still a decent degree of independence from shoreside facilities. But what's probably more interesting is the fact that rather than having the 3 cabins that the original boat had, this one has the 2 cabin option. So what you also get is just a massive, massive bathroom on the starboard side. And Espen's saying that the reason for that is that when he goes cruising, he basically feels like, okay, I've been cruising, I've enjoyed the boat, I've enjoyed my time, but I just want a proper shower.
Yeah.
I just want to go home and get some creature comforts.
He feels.
Yeah, I know how he feels too. He's exactly right. So he's given you an absolutely beautiful bathroom in that 2 cabin layout.
So just the one bathroom?
Just one bathroom.
But one big one.
It is spectacular. Yeah. Oh, goodness me. What a place.
So would you trade that for 2 separate bathrooms then?
Actually, I've got 2 kids who argue a lot, so I'd have the 3 cabin version any day of the week.
Lock them away.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Just in the interests of familial kind of harmony. But look, there's no Marex 440 that is going to disappoint you. That's the kind of boat it is.
To be fair, there's no Marex that's going to disappoint you.
No, exactly so.
It's a very convincing range.
Whether new or used, to be honest with you, they hold their value a little, don't they? And now another boat that I just want to mention is the Galleon 435 GTI. Now, day boats, they're quite big news at the moment because there's a trend towards very narrow, tapered, med-style premium day boats, walk-around boats with outboard power.
You're basically talking Axopar, are you?
Well, not quite. I'm kind of a little bit.
Or a lot of others have come into that.
I'm thinking about the likes of Pardo and Fjord.
Okay,
Fjord
bigger stuff.
probably introduced that idea, and it was sort of creatively repurposed by other designers for other brands. But the Galleon 435 GTI, well, forget about your tapered bow. Massive 13'6" beam, huge drop-down terraces, massive bow. You know, we talk about a bow flare. Well, you know, the Galleon bow flare is now their kind of trademark feature. The hull actually extends outwards, right forwards, doesn't it?
They look a bit like a hammerhead shark, though.
They do, don't they? They look ungainly, and you wonder exactly how finessed they'll be in a bit of a sea state, but at the same time, the space in that foredeck is unbelievable. Space for 12 to chill out and just enjoy themselves. Brilliant boat, and the inboard version instead of the outboards means cheaper to buy by between, I think, 50 and 120 grand.
Why is that then?
I have no idea. I'm not going to question the man who tells me how much this costs. If he's telling me it's 100 grand less, I'll take that.
And that's
of
with
course,
diesels, is it?
That's right. But you still get, of course, without the outboards, you get a proper swim platform so you can carry a tender. Nice. And it puts the weight where it belongs, because often in the past, I've looked at these Galleons and I've thought, well, they're so clever, they're so satisfying, but with so much clever equipment aft, hydraulic gear aft, there's a lot of weight at the back end. Yeah. So they tend to run bow up, and it can be difficult. You can't put your entire crew of 12 in the bow just to run flat. Yeah. So just shifting a couple of tons from the transom up high and aft and deeper down and further forward just makes all kinds of sense. So that is a great boat. And for my money, it actually makes some of those sort of Fjord and Pardo style day boats seem just a little bit ineffective in a way.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I like that. I like the Ziara 44. That's from BSK Marine, isn't it?
Thing,
that is, yeah.
Does look cool though.
Yeah, well, BSK, as you know, they're famous for super high performance offshore ribs, but they've turned their hand to a kind of premium walk around day boat that delivers 74, 75 knots of performance.
Oh, just your average kind of day boat.
Exactly. It really looks the part. Built in Athens. Quite an exciting boat. We're going to get out there and test it. You can have inboard or outboard, but I'm looking forward to having a go at that.
And does that look well put together?
It really does, and it's quite pleasing how much effort they've gone to. You know, there are cleats at the back end that are just tucked under hatches, so you can tidy away your lines. Nice. You know, the sink. It sounds ridiculous, but the sink in the transverse wet bar is kind of faceted and sculpted in a sort of lustrous black, so it's like an art installation.
Are you getting excited about a sink?
I am a little bit, yeah. It's these small things, isn't it?
See.
And one more thing, actually, the foredeck slightly raised just to give you a little bit of volume down below, because it's five berth. Let me just check my notes. Is it 4 berth or 5 berth? It's a 4 berth boat. So you've got a little bit of volume there beneath the foredeck. Okay. But in order to avoid you feeling like you're right up on top, the furniture is basically kind of Japanese style luncheon sort of setup where it's all deck level. So you basically have a deck picnic rather than a proper meal up there. So it's very casual and relaxed, and very different. And I like that. It's just nice to walk around a show and see stuff that feels that different.
Do you actually want to do 70 knots though?
Oh, not me, no. When I was 20, not now. Yeah. 40's very much enough for me.
I quite agree. I think anything over 50 knots starts to feel a bit sketchy now.
It does, doesn't it?
I mean, there are boats that will happily do it, but do you really want to travel at that speed? I mean, as soon as you hit a wave, you're going to lose, certainly, any of your nice fancy Japanese drinks.
Yeah, well, I tell you what I would lose. I'd lose my missus and my kids, because they wouldn't come out again. They would. Yeah. They're just no interest in it. Yeah. So, no, but the fact that it can do that doesn't mean you need to do that.
Does it not then mean you've got the boat to yourself?
There is that. It's every cloudy. But look, I've saved the best for last, because I think it is the best. It's not a name many people have heard of, but the Vicness 10.
I did have a look at that.
You did?
That is a nice looking boat. It's just got a bit of everything. It just covers all the bases, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And it's built in Norway, a Norwegian brand, built near Bergen. And you see even very premium Norwegian brands like Windy and, Marex. They're not built in Norway anymore. Well, Viknes is.
Okay.
Okay, and this Viknes 10, it kind of inhabits that space somewhere between an offshore pilot house cruiser from the likes of Targa and something more polished and sort of recreationally sophisticated like a Marex. So it's a really engaging boat, and it's just so clever. I mean, for a start, right, you've got decent underpinnings. They've been around for a long time, and they use semi-displacement hulls, and their strapline is actually built for the North Sea. That's what it says directly under their logo. So that is quite reassuring in its own right for those of us who go boating in this part of the world. But it's super high spec.
There's a load of cabins in there as well.
3 cabins. So the dinette in the saloon, you don't even need to convert that because you've got the 3 cabins down below. So instead of a telescopic strut, so you can convert it into a bed, which you can have on the options list. It's got the upright for the table is actually a cabinet with your drinks and your teacups and your glasses and everything else.
Oh, tiny.
They've just thought so hard about it. There's quality all over it.
You know my favourite bit, though?
Go on.
Those little seats on the foredeck. So you go on the foredeck, it looks very clean, easy to move around. There's just a hatch, lifted up, and 2 little deck chairs appear out of nowhere.
You call them they are directors' chairs all day long.
All right, call it what you will, but you've got to admit that is a very cool little feature. You never know it was there.
No.
Doesn't block your view out when you're at the helm, cruising, tucked completely away, but then you arrive at your anchor, at your destination, drop the anchor, pull up the chairs. How nice is that?
Exactly so. It's so good. All built in-house.
And those canopies at the back. Yeah. That's clever.
It's so clever because, the Marex style that we see copied on a lot of boats, you have little compartments that are vertical and you have to cram them in. And, of course, that creases up the window sections on your canvases. Well, these 3 canvases roll down from their permanent place at the back there on the back end of the roof. So there's no blocking of the view, no creasing of those windows. And then you just slide them around, little tensioners, keep them really taut. It's the best system I've ever seen.
Absolutely. Seconds to do. Easy. Doesn't get in the way. And normally that's such a pain in the arse, isn't it? Having to put those canopies on and off your boat every time you get on and off.
Unbelievable pain in the arse, yeah. And that's partly why I love this boat. We've got to move on. We have, but just a couple more things. Storage spaces in that cockpit, right? They're not hinged from the back, they're hinged from the front. So you can lift it one-handed, easy access, and you don't have to worry about taking cushions off. It's the same
so they come out
all over that.
This way?
That's right. So they're hinged at the front, they come out that way. So you just lift them up. It's not a problem because the cushions don't butt up against each other.
Nothing more tedious than having to pop cushions on and off those bloody little things with your fingers under there trying to stick them down.
Drives you wild, doesn't it? And there's a proper second helm at the back with the joystick, with the I shouldn't say joystick, it's not the joystick, is it? It's the bow and stern thrusters and the wheel, and the fact that it's there as standard, by the way, means that of course you can park more easily directly next to a side gate, but also if you're just cruising in the summer, you can cruise from there, you can drive from there, and you don't have to exile yourself from that alfresco party in that cockpit. So it's brilliant. And the best bit of all, right? Brilliant design, brilliant execution, really cool boat, 36-footer that does all kinds of things, built in Norway, not in Eastern Europe to cut costs. And it comes in at a price from 258 grand.
Seriously? Can you actually get it for that, though?
Well, you can because the standard package is so high. There's almost nothing you've got to add. So I was looking at that, I'm thinking best boat in the show by a country mile, and I've been there 4 days, and there's some spectacular stuff. But Viknes 10, brilliant boat. Viknes, really good brand. And available in the UK now.
Yes, I heard that. So that's Fine Design, is it, who are stocking that?
That's right.
Down in Poole?
Exactly right. Now, we're going to move on, but before we do so, Hugo and I have put together videos on all of these boats from the Dusseldorf boat show. So if you want to take a look at those, then please do subscribe to the Motorboating?
No, that's very different. You don't want to go there.
You don't want to go there.
Motorboat and Yachting. Remember,
channel.
That's the magazine that
on
we work
YouTube.
for.
That's right. And take a look because it's some quite exciting stuff to take a look at. Now, next up.
Come on in.
Okay, kit.
Right. Any particular kind of kit?
Absolutely. We're going to talk about inflatable tenders. And I know you're a bit of an expert here because you've got 2.
Well, you say that. I do have 2, but I have a very small boat. So my regular boat is just a 22-foot Carnic sports fisher with an outboard. So I am kind of limited to how much kit I can take on board. So I do have 2 tenders. One is a tender that I take with me, and one is a tender that I leave on the mooring, because I'm obviously a cheapskate, so I keep my boat on a swing mooring.
Yeah.
So I have to have something to get out to the boat, and I either leave it on the mooring or I have to take it on the boat.
Yeah,
So,
and the one I'm excited by is the Lodestar Billy No Mates.
yeah, I know. It's quite a special name, isn't it? You probably get a bit of a feel for it from the name.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that they've embraced that. So, not only, I'm obviously very disappointed I've got such a small boat, but I don't have any friends either. So,
So it's basically just you in an inflatable with space for just you.
But what I like about it is that it's properly built and designed like a proper little inflatable tender. So it's the actual material used. It's proper PVC, decent thickness. It feels robust, but it's just very small diameter tubes and so short. I mean, it's about 2 meters long, something like that. So you can literally only get one person on it, and it's literally a flat floor. There is a little inflatable floor on it, but it's so small that you can't actually sit in it. So you have to kneel in it and paddle. But it does the job. It gets me out to my boat, and the beauty of it is it weighs absolutely nothing. It doesn't take up any space, so I can lift it up, store it on the foredeck. The little tubes, they just sort of slot under the bow rails, strap it down on the foredeck, and it means you've always got something. So when you do get to your local anchorage, you can jump in the boat, paddle yourself ashore, grab yourself an ice cream or a beer, whatever it is, get back to the boat, job done, without having to go through that whole faff of deflating and inflating and stowing it away.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
Real ball.
Because that is a ball ache.
Yeah. And they are heavy, those things.
Yeah.
But if you've ever tried to deflate one of those tenders, put it back in the bag, that is not happening.
No, it doesn't happen, does it? No, the way it comes out of the box when you first buy it, it's not the way it goes.
You're never getting it back.
It never happens again, does it?
But really good tip, if you are going to do it, you must have an electric pump. It makes the world of difference. If you're sat with one of those foot pumps or hand pumps, you're there for 20 minutes, you'll be knackered before you even get into the boat.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because they're compromised boats necessarily, because they have to be small, they have to be light. So to make life easy for yourself, you've got to get an electric pump. I mean, I do a bit of stand-up paddleboarding, and I was saying to you earlier over a cup of tea, it's just, the cheap ones that I've previously owned, just pumping the thing up to the required pressure. By the time the board is ready, I'm knackered.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going out then. I need to rest for an hour.
And a very good new little bit of kit. There's a company called Scanstrut who have made a electric inflator pump that actually fits into the boat. So you can have it installed on the boat, and then you literally just need to plug the hose in, plug it into the boat, job done.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those already.
If you've got space for one of them on board, that will be a complete game changer, because there's so many things that you do have to inflate. It's not the tender, then it is the paddle boards, as you say. So very good way of doing it.
Handy gear. Now, talking to Lodestar, I've got a lot of time for them. I've seen a few at shows. I've never actually been out on one, but the quality seems a cut above to me.
Yeah, and my other tender's a Lodestar too, actually. It's a little bit bigger. It's a sort of 2.3 metre. I'm not sure they're still making them, but there are plenty of people who make similar things. But the thing to really think about is, okay, how big a boat do I need? Because really, they're heavy things. A 2 or 3 person boat can easily weigh 30, 40 kilograms if you're not careful. So think very carefully about how many people you actually want to be able to carry at once. And then there's a bit of a trade-off between weight and durability, sort of robustness.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been a bit of an argument between PVC and Hyperlon. PVC, if you want to, just use it occasionally for lightweight work, roll it up, tuck it away, keep it in a locker. If you're going to keep it inflated and give it a fairly aggressive knockabout life, use it off, and then Hyperlon, which is basically the material they use on heavy duty ribs, isn't it? Is a major step up, but a major step up in weight as well, isn't it?
I don't know. Is it weight? Certainly a step up in price.
Yeah, it certainly is. That. Yeah, it certainly is. But there are alternatives these days.
There's another clever company called. Are you thinking Easy Raft?
That's exactly what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, another clever idea. So rather than using PVC, it's a much thinner material that they use for kites and sails. I don't know. Do you know the technical term for it?
I'm glad you asked, Hugo. I've been practicing this. It is thermoplastic polyurethane.
Yeah, because everybody's going to know what that is. Yeah, I've got some of that in the kitchen roll.
See, the idea there is that it's supposed to be more durable, but more flexible than PVC.
It doesn't feel
tougher,
more durable.
but easier to tuck away.
Yeah, and it's a lot thinner, it's a lot lighter, and it means you can get a sort of 2 or 3 person tender that only weighs, it's about 14 kilos or something.
I've got a couple of details here.
Go
if
on
you're
then.
looking at the Easy Raft range, and I almost struggle to believe this, the range goes from 2.4 to 3.6 metres, and the all-in weight goes from 12 to 17 kilos.
Yeah,
Which
you
is
see, that is a
unbelievable,
lot
isn't
less
it?
because you're talking 35, 40 kilos for a conventional PVC boat.
Exactly. It makes it so much easier. And the pack down proportions, they tell me, are 85 by 35 by 33 centimetres, which is basically like a little sausage, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's a good chance of that just fitting in a locker rather than, because if I take my main tender on board and deflate it, it has to sit sort of crumpled up in the corner of the boat and it occupies half the cockpit.
Yes. And I'm quite interested in these because they've gone from the 3 essentially inflatable tubes to 4 now, haven't they? So that's a Q series.
Yeah, well, I had a go on one of those, and it does work. They're really big tubes, so it feels very stable. But the only problem is with those 3 tubes is that you've then got a flat deck, so it's very much like a raft, and it's quite weird if you're sort of sitting there. It's a bit like if you're sitting on a sofa like this, it's just not terribly comfortable. Whereas if you've got a little that you can put your feet in, it's just a more natural
Which is
position.
exactly what you get, isn't it? So as far as I could see from these Easy Raft tenders, they're relatively narrow beam, 1.45 metres, and that is the same whether you get the 2.4 metre tender or the 3.6 metre tender. So they're narrow.
Yeah.
So you tend to be sitting on the tubes with your feet on the inside. You can, of course, get on the inside, but space is limited.
Yeah.
Power is limited too because they're very lightweight, so 5 horsepower.
Yeah.
So they're not performance machines.
Yeah.
They're not particularly big baggage carriers, but they do an effective job at a very low weight. But they cost a bit of money, don't they? I think we go from, 1,300 to 2,400 quid for the top rated tender. And if you get a more conventional tender at 3.6 metres for around about £1,000, can't you?
Yeah,
So
that's
than half the
a
price.
lot less. But now you mention it, you should definitely look at how it is powered or rowed because some of those, some of the setups are terrible.
Yeah.
A lot of the time I can't really be bothered to take an engine out and you do end up having to row them and it makes the world of difference. So before you buy anything, check what the oars are like, check what the fittings are like, because if you have sort of saggy old rollocks that don't really work properly or constantly popping out or the oars aren't long enough or they're too long or they're too flimsy, it's really boring.
Well, you must be a better man than me to even mention rowing a tender. I've tried it on a couple of occasions. I mean, my upper body is pretty much baggage only. It's not of much use to anybody. But honestly, I mean, the draft is so shallow.
Yeah.
The windage is so significant. They're so light. They just skip across the surface in completely the wrong direction.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't do it for any distance, but just if I'm just going out to my mooring, which is sort of 50, 100 yards away from the club, then I just can't be bothered with lugging around a great engine because they're heavy things, these outboards. I mean, they'd say they're portable.
They are not. They're not. I had a Yam Inflatable with a Mercury 5 horsepower 4-stroke outboard portable. It's supposed to be like 25, 27 kilos. That's not a lot to lift. I can quite happily manage that. But not in the form of this bloody thing. Honestly, it was all elbows and brackets and things that would dig into your arteries and into your collarbones, and you try not to spill lubricants on yourself. It's just a nightmare.
Yeah, those so-called carry handles, not really so much.
It's ridiculous. It's so bad. Now, I'm a bit cynical, as you know, as regards electric propulsion on larger platforms, even hybrid platforms. But a little electric outboard for an inflatable tender is absolutely the way to go all day long.
Every day of the week, absolutely. So much less hassle. You haven't got to worry about, as you say, if you've got petrol in there, you're endlessly either doing up the cap and then you have to do the little breather thing on top, and if you forget to close that and you put it on its side and then all the petrol spills out, and then they're all 4-stroke, so you have to work out which side of the engine you're allowed to lie it on, otherwise the oil goes into the carburetor.
This is when you rue the day you ever parted with the cash, isn't it? I felt about several portable outboards exactly like that, and I felt about several inflatable tenders exactly like that. So what we're saying is if you combine a nice little Easy Raft with an electric outboard, you're in a pretty good place.
Yeah, although I think for any tender, to be honest, I'd just go for an electric outboard because they're so simple. You haven't got the whole question of whether it's going to start or not, or whether you've got the right mix of fuel, or whether the petrol's too old. You just put the battery in, flick a switch, and it goes. There's no tugging away.
Even then, one thing you've got to add surely is an extended tiller, because sitting at the back end of a small inflatable, you're just wheeling like a buffoon down the waterway, aren't you? Can't see anything, can't get any steerage.
Yeah, and particularly important if you've got a heavy petrol thing hanging off the back, particularly if you have got enough power to get them planing, then you really want to be sat forward. And for that, having a tiller extension makes all the difference. You can get your weight forward, get the bow down, and you can actually skip around, particularly if you go for one of those inflatable floors that has a little bit of a V shape in the hull. Yeah. They will go along quite well with a 5 or 10 horsepower.
Well, I'll have to bow down to you on that because you've got a couple and I parted company with mine because I was so cross with it. So, once bitten, twice shy. It's going to be a long time before I have another inflatable tender.
Fair point.
Should we move on to section C?
Go on then. What have we got coming up?
Yeah, this is an issue of the day. And it's pontoon boats.
Has it been troubling you? Has it kept you awake at night?
Yeah, it has. It has. Because I went and tested, what was it called? A Regency 250 LE3 Sport. A pontoon boat.
You're going to have to explain to the audience.
Exactly what
our American friends will know exactly what it is. Over here, not so much.
Okay, so you've got a couple of hulls, essentially, with a plateau on top, a deck on top, a rectangular deck. So there's no taper at the bow. There's no tapering of the beam. If you've got, for instance, like a 10-foot beam at the centre, you've got a 10-foot beam at the bow, a 10-foot beam at the aft end.
So it's basically a rectangular raft.
It's a rectangular raft
and
with
when
a little bit of outboard power.
You say hulls. I mean, are they really hulls?
Well, no, really, they're logs. That's what they call them. There's a whole different language to learn, and we're not really on board with it because we don't get them in the UK, and that's the problem I have.
But there's a reason they call them logs, because they're not really shaped like a hull. It's basically like you've welded together 3 oil drums on each side in a long, thin tube.
Yes.
And then bolted a deck on top of the two.
Yeah, they're a bit agricultural at times.
A bit pointy at the front.
Yeah, you have little fine entry nose cones with little splash deflectors, but let's not pretend they're performance boats because they're not. Although having said that, taking that Regency out, I think we had a 300 horsepower Mercury on the transom. Yeah, I mean it's a 27-foot boat with, let me check, an 8'6" beam. So it's a boat that will carry 14 people, all right? And we got 36 knots out of that. And of course, you could run at any speed, completely flat, brilliant directional stability, brilliant tracking.
I can't help feeling
to drive.
When you say running completely flat, presumably that's the only time you can actually take it out, because if there's any kind of waves.
We took it out in I'll say 2 to 3 footers.
Okay.
We took a little bit of water over the bow. The bow's low, so it's into the bow, through the bow gate actually, and the water swept aft, past my feet, soaked my tootsies, and straight out the back end. So self-draining deck. Yes,
self-draining. It's like an automatic pressure washer.
That's right. It runs straight off. But look, you can take them out in those conditions. But let's face it. Look, this is about application, all right?
Right.
When we go out, we pick a nice day. If it's a crappy day, not everyone does this for a living, so they don't still have to go out. You don't take your kids out in that. When you think about the kind of applications you most enjoy with your boat, pootling around in bays, going up tidal estuaries, beaching the boat a little bit, having a beach picnic, a pontoon boat is better at all of those things for less money than a conventional monohull.
Yeah, but there's a bit of a trade-off, isn't there?
Don't talk to me about style.
Look, if you buy a boat, you want it to look like a boat, and you want to be able to show it off to your mates, and your mates go, that's a nice looking bit of kit you've got there. Kind of hard to do that with a raft strapped to some old oil drums.
Yeah, I think you've pushed the point too far there.
Well, all right, okay, it doesn't look that bad, to be fair, but it is just a big square deck, and however fancy you doll up the seats and all the kit, it still looks a bit like a high-powered raft, and I just don't know. And then they've put a sort of gates round it. It's kind of a floating, it's basically a high-powered, well, as it says, a high-powered pontoon, but which is fine if you want a high-powered pontoon, but if you want something that looks like a boat, feels like a boat, goes like a boat, I don't know.
Can you, and you're carnic, can you pootle along at 6 to 8 knots quite contentedly? Are you kicking out a big wake and wasting loads of fuel and upsetting all the local boaters? Because there's zero wake at 6, 8 knots on this thing.
Okay, because essentially it's like a catamaran then. So,
Well, actually, it's got 3 hulls. It's got 3 logs, this particular model. But the principle's the same. It just looks after you in all kinds of ways that a monohull doesn't. Okay?
yeah. And then there's that helm seat, though, isn't there? I mean, that does look a bit like it's been stolen from a 1970s Cadillac.
You're actually talking about that helm seat as though it's a bad thing.
Well, it's very comfortable.
It is amazing. It's massive. I mean, 2 of me could fit in it. It's got armrests. It goes up and down. It goes round and round. It reclines. I might be making it up when I say that a footrest comes out of the bottom. But it feels like that sort of thing.
Lazy boy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is without question the most comfortable helm seat I've ever sat in my life. So much so that for the first time and the only time ever, I actually took my right hand off the throttle and just pop that on the wheel and just settle back, because you feel like you're in your living room. It's just extraordinary.
Basically turns you into an American just by sitting in it.
Yeah, you're trying to look at the negatives here. You go, I don't appreciate.
That's not necessarily a negative.
Well, no.
I'm just saying you become a slightly different person when you get behind the wheel of that boat.
Well, you become a very smiley person because you've only paid $100,000 for it. Now, look here. You've been to a great many shows. You've seen 8-metre boats. We could talk about a few. In fact, let's do that. Let's name a couple. At Southampton, there was the Arxon 8, a fairly standard-looking rib in basic format for 200. I think, how much was it? $200,000 plus VAT.
Yeah, you say
And
it's
you've got to
fairly
add
standard.
extras
That's
to it.
quite a nice hardcore rib with a lot of features on it.
Yeah, it looks decent. It's a proper rib. No
Yeah.
two ways about that. But it's more than double the money.
Yeah, but which would you rather take out in a Force 6?
Would I want to go out in a 4.6? You yourself say you're not a 70-knot man. Are you a 10-foot swells man? Because I'm not
out of
anymore.
choice, but every now and then you get a bit caught out. And also, there's a lot of fun to be had. You go out in a decent boat with a decent amount of power.
Yeah.
I agree, you wouldn't want to take all your family and friends, but if you're just being a bit selfish, want to go and have a bit of a play, you can have a lot of fun in a boat like that.
In a boat like the Arxon.
Well, or any kind of decent rig with a decent
8-metre
hull.
boat.
Yeah.
You can.
But you
you've
don't have to
still
go
got-
that extreme. There are things in between there. You could get yourself an Axopar or a Saxdor or a Callmate or...
Yeah, you could get yourself all of those things, and essentially your argument relies on self-image. Self-worth.
No,
Maybe you're
no.
overcompensating. But look, the fact of the matter is that you'd prefer to be seen boating in an Arxon 8, but you'd prefer to go boating in a Regency 250 LE3 Sport.
No, I think you'd prefer to go boating in a Regency.
Well, the
LE3
reason for
Sport.
that is because I've been boating on one and you haven't, but you should.
No, that is true.
You
That
should.
is true. I am, basing it all entirely on my own prejudices.
And as does everyone, it would seem, in the relatively conservative and rib-friendly UK market, because that is the attitude. It's preconception.
Yeah.
People who haven't been out on that boat say no to that boat. People who have been out on that boat say very much yes. And that's what I'm saying.
So only one person's been out on it, presumably.
That's me, and I'm saying yes. Yeah, no, in fairness, in spite of the fact that I'm talking up pontoon boats for UK waters with good reason, I've yet ever to see a pontoon boat in UK waters other than that boat that I tested.
And I can see, on the lakes in the States or somewhere where it's generally slightly calmer, sunnier conditions, I can see it makes a lot of sense if you just want to go out with a load of mates, have a few drinks, barbecue, whatever it may be. I can totally see the point of it, and I can see areas of the world where it would be absolutely ideal. Personally, I'm not quite so convinced that I would want one in the Solent.
Well, I think less of you, Hugo.
Shall we agree to disagree on
We're
that?
going to have to agree to disagree. But I'm certain that the people watching and listening to this podcast will have their own opinions. And judging by the feedback I got for the video I made on that Regency 250 LE3 Sport, I will be pretty much on my own in suggesting that that is the way forward. Either way, we'd love to hear people's feedback, wouldn't we?
Definitely. I mean, obviously I'm right, but, I still like to hear other people's feedback.
And I think on that note, that probably brings an end to our first ever podcast. We sincerely hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have done, then please do join us again next week for another podcast of, what are we called?
equally geeky chat. Boat Geeks, I
Boat
think.
Geeks, that's exactly it. Thanks for listening.